functions in standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The simplest form, or the parent form, is y equals x squared, where a equals 1, and the graph will look like this. So let's take a look at this first one and see what happens to a when it's something other than 1. So if we first graph y equals x squared, let's just take a couple. Let's say that x squared, let's say the first one we plug in is a negative 1. So negative 1 squared is a positive 1. 0 squared is 0. And 1 squared is 1. So we end up, let's do a couple more. So negative 2 squared would be 4. And 2 squared is 4. So we have our parabola of our parent function for this quadratic. So now let's take a look at what happens when a is 2. So let's use those same points. If we said negative 2 for x, so negative 2 squared is a positive 4 times 2, that's 8. So it's going to be up in here. And let's say negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1 times 2, which is 2. 0 squared is 0 times 2 is 0. 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4 times 2 is 8. So here is our parabola for that quadratic function. So let's look at what happens when a becomes 1/2. Let's do those same points. So if we plug in a negative 2 squared is 4, and half of 4 is 2. Negative 1 squared is 1, and half of 1 is a half. 0 squared is 0, and the half of that is 0. 1 squared is 1, and 1 times a half is a half. 2 squared is 4, and half of 4 is 2. So we end up with this parabola for our quadratic function. Okay, let's take a look now when a still has those same values, 1, 2, and a half, but what happens when they're negative? So if we first start with our parent function, use negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4, but now it's negative 4. Negative 1 squared is 1, but it's a negative 1. 0 squared is 0, and there's no negative 0. 1 squared is 1, and it's negative. 2 squared is 4, and it's negative. So it looks like it's that same parabola, just flipped upside down. So what about the second one? If we pick negative 2 squared is 4, and 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. Negative 1 squared is 1, times a negative 2 is a negative 2. 0 squared is 0, times a negative 2 is 0. 1 squared times by negative 2 is a negative 2. 2 squared is 4, times by a negative 2 is a negative 8. So here's our parabola. And the last graph. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4, and then times by a negative half is a negative 2. Negative 1 squared is positive 1, times by a negative half is a negative half. 0 squared is 0, times by a negative half is 0. 1 squared times is 1, times by a negative half is a negative half. 2 squared is 4, times by a negative half, which is negative 2. So there are our parabolas. So what observations can we make about the effect of a on the function? Well, we can say that the larger the value of a, the more narrow the parabola becomes. And what we can say about the negative, if a is positive, it's going to be facing up. If a is negative, facing down. Let's take a look at the vertex. A vertex of a parabola is the highest or lowest point on the parabola. A maximum would be when our vertex is the highest, and the minimum value would be when it's at the lowest point. So let's look at these three examples down here. If we look at this, we can tell here's our vertex, so it's going to be a minimum. And our vertex is at, the x value is at 0, and the y value is at 2. Here's our vertex for the second one. The x value is at a -2, and the y value is at 0. And this is also a minimum. And our last one, our vertex is up here. It's at 2 on the x-axis and 8 on the y. And this is going to be a maximum vertex.